Foundation. So I'm going to introduce the panel that's going to come out and join us now. Blair Beasley, who is with the Anderson Foundation, but Drawdown in particular. Whitney Brown, who's with Georgia Interfaith Power and Light, and Jasmine Crow, the founder of GoodR. So please join us on the stage.
All right, well, welcome. That was a really exciting session to get to follow. It's wonderful to be with you all today for what I know will be another great discussion with leaders that are working to grow climate solutions in Georgia and do so in ways that keep equity and justice at the forefront of their work. My name is Blair Beasley, and I am the Director of Climate Strategies for the Ray C. Anderson Foundation. This morning, we were lucky to hear from one of the trustees of the foundation, our foundation president, Mary Ann Anderson Lanier. As she shared, the Ray C. Anderson Foundation is based in Georgia and set up to carry on the legacy of our namesake and his vision for a more sustainable society. This includes work to help launch and grow an initiative called Drawdown Georgia. Drawdown Georgia is a state-centered climate solutions roadmap that was directly inspired by the global work of Project Drawdown. It's based on research from a team at Georgia Tech, the University of Georgia, Emory, and Georgia State. We came together to identify 20 high-impact climate solutions that are ready to scale in Georgia that can significantly cut our state's carbon footprint this decade. We know that we can deploy solutions like energy efficiency, large-scale and rooftop solar, electric vehicles, composting, and reduced food waste to draw down our carbon emissions. This transition to a low-carbon economy offers an opportunity to advance other key societal priorities like equity, public health, economic development, and the larger environment. We released the foundational Drawdown Georgia research almost 1 year ago. And since then, the project has grown from a team of academics to a multi-stakeholder initiative that's utilizing this list of 20 high-impact climate solutions as a statewide, community-based, research-based, nonpartisan roadmap for action in Georgia. So it's incredibly exciting to hear from our panel today, which includes some of the amazing leaders who are working to grow many of the climate solutions that are identified by Drawdown Georgia, and showing us all how we can reduce emissions while lifting up communities and people across our state. So I know you guys are probably experts by now, but just a quick overview of how our session's gonna run. We're gonna hear from each of our panelists, who I'll introduce momentarily. You'll have to stick with us as we go back and forth from virtual presentations to in-person. And then once the speakers are done, we'll have a chance to turn to audience Q&A, so get your questions ready. Okay, so to briefly introduce our panel. First, we have Jasmine Crow, who is the founder and CEO of GoodR, a sustainable waste management company that leverages technology to combat hunger and reduce food waste. Jasmine is also one of the co-chairs of the Drawdown Georgia Leadership Council, which we are very grateful for. Michelle Moore, who's joining us virtually, is the CEO of Groundswell, a nonprofit that builds community power through equitable community solar projects, clean energy programs that reduce energy burdens, and pioneering research initiatives that help light the way to clean energy futures for all. Michelle is a social entrepreneur and a former White House official. And finally, we have Whitney Brown, the Communications Director for Georgia Interfaith Power and Light. GIPL is a nonprofit that works to equip faith communities across Georgia to care for creation through worship, education, and the stewardship of natural resources. And I've come to learn that Whitney is also a proud graduate of Agnes Scott College. And with that, I will turn the mic over to Jasmine to kick off our session.
Thank you so much, Blair. And good afternoon. How's everyone doing? Good. Well, I also bring greetings from my executive assistant, who is also a graduate of Agnes Scott, and she's so excited for me to be here. So, Ashley, hello to you. I want to speak to you all today really briefly about my journey from entrepreneur to social entrepreneur and how I became a climate advocate. And it was not by chance. I really believe it was deeply via purpose. Now, I've been invested in the hunger fight since 2011. And when I moved to Atlanta, Georgia in 2013, I was driving through downtown and I saw hundreds of people that were experiencing homelessness. And I'm always asked, what made you start your Sunday Soul Initiative, which I'll speak about briefly. And I always say I have no idea. Something just moved me in that moment. And I went home and I posted on Facebook, I'm going to start a feeding initiative downtown Atlanta every Sunday called Sunday Soul. It's going to be a really great soulful dinner, and I mixed it with that old school kind of Sunday music that you either listened to it after church or your parents would play it on Saturday mornings and you knew it was time to clean up. And so that's what I started, and I started doing that almost to the date about 8 years ago in 2013, and I began feeding anywhere from 300 to 500 people out of my apartment every week. And a video of my work actually went viral in 2016, and I woke up one morning and I'm reading through the comments, and amongst the praise on Facebook, there was one reoccurring question that people kept asking. And that question was, who donates the food? And the reality was nobody. I was couponing, I was price matching, I was taking $5 and $10 donations and trying to piecemeal that money together to make meals for about 300 and 500 people. I got really good at making pasta and chicken. And I always say I'm the reason that Walmart no longer price matches, because I used to definitely bring in all the circulars and give them a run for their money. But that question sparked something in me, and I went to research. And like many of us do, the first thing I did was open Google, and I put in what happens to extra food from businesses at the end of the night. And pops up food waste. And I couldn't believe the statistic that was staring back at me. It said that in the United States, we waste 72 billion pounds of perfectly good food every single year. And what this means is this is about 2% of GDP that we spend on food we never eat, approximately $218 million that's spent on a daily basis, if you guys can think about that. So it's billions of dollars, $40 billion a year that businesses are wasting in potential tax credits. And what this meant was that 27% of everything in our landfills is food. And that was shocking to me, to see that we were wasting nearly 80 billion pounds of perfectly good food when I was struggling to feed just 300 and 500 people and not often knowing how I was going to make that happen for them. And that was really when I would say my climate journey began. I didn't know that not only we were wasting all this food, but also what it was doing to the environment. And so as this food sits in landfills, over time it begins to gradually rot, producing methane gas, which is one of the leading contributors to global climate change. And so I then I was like, listen, we've got a three-pronged issue here. This is social. People could be eating this perfectly good food that's going to waste. It was definitely environmental, as this food is ending up in landfill more and more every single day. It's producing this methane gas. It's harmful. What I also learned about it as well, too, Blair, I don't know if I ever shared this with you, is that most of our landfills happen to be in poorer neighborhoods. So not only do people not have access to food living in poorer populations, now they are having to breathe in more methane gas. So these people, it's affecting their health as well. And so that is the day that I would say that my life changed. I am not a technical founder. I have been invested in the social impact space really since I graduated college. But I was inspired at the emergence of technology, so your Uber Eats and your DoorDashes. And if you guys will remember when those first were coming out, there were referral codes. And and there still are referral codes, right? If you refer a friend, there's a code and you'll get $10 off, and then they'll get $10 off. So I was getting all these referral codes, and I kept thinking, how crazy is it that we've got all these apps that are making it easier for people like you and I to get access to food, but no one was building technology to get food easier to people that didn't know where their next meal was coming from. And so that was my aha moment. That was my idea. And I'll tell you, I went to a lot of people in 2016 who told me I was crazy and that this will never work, no one will ever pay for that, and why I wanted it to be a social enterprise as opposed to a nonprofit is I saw one key thing. The businesses were already paying to throw this food away. And what I could do is help them create better outputs around it. I could tell them how many pounds of food they're keeping out of landfill, which can show them what their CO2 emission reduction looks like, helping them improve their carbon footprint. I could help them save money, not only on the tonnage that they were spending, but also on the tax benefits that they could claim as it got donated to nonprofits. And what I believed was always priceless, and I still believe till this day, is that we could feed hungry people. But it wasn't met without challenges. I could tell you today that the climate that we are in, and I mean climate in people caring plus climate change, is a lot of work. And it's because of foundations and studies like Project Drawdown and Ray C. Anderson Foundation that people actually care. Because when I was speaking to businesses in 2017 about food waste and about hunger, it was kind of like, it was a nice to have, but no one was really focused on it. Well, fast forward, we reached this pandemic in 2020, and I think a lot of us will forget that pandemic overshadowed a lot of things that happened in climate as well. We saw wildfires. We saw record temperatures. All of this as well was going on during 2020, and these were all direct contributors to climate change. Last year, in 2019, Project Drawdown said that food waste was the number 3 thing that we can do to reduce climate change. Last year, it went to number 1. And what's crazy about it is if you all will remember and think back, the lines around food banks, and I could tell you Gooder's work for certain, we were impacted by it because so many people were in need of food. And so every time we hosted a pop-up grocery store, we were getting requests and more requests. But at the same time, we also saw those stories with fields and fields of food getting plowed back under. One of the things that I stand on firmly is that we believe that hunger is not an issue of scarcity. There's more than enough food if we're wasting billions of pounds every year. We believe that hunger is a matter of logistics. And so what we've built at Gooder is a connected network which keeps food very close to where we recover it from. So whether our customers are doing composting like Agnes Scott, you guys should be really proud. You guys are a Gooder customer. We compost all of the food here at Agnes Scott so it does not go to waste. Or you are a business that is donating your surplus food. We keep it around you. So we find either gardens, MRF facilities to take that compost to, animal farms to take the non-edible food to, or we find nonprofits that are in and around the business. And we do that for 2 reasons. One, Gooder measures our own carbon footprint. We are always carbon negative or carbon neutral in our deliveries, and so we're keeping the food really close to where we access it from. But also we want our businesses to create social change in their own backyards. I'm proud to say that since we began this work officially in 2018, we've now diverted over 3 million pounds of food that would have otherwise gone to landfill to meals. And in addition to our work, we've also began providing meals last year heavily in the pandemic. Over 30 million meals we've provided to date. And this is to people that, if not for Gooder, would have otherwise gone hungry. What this impact means, though, this is more than 840,000 gallons of water that Gooder is saving on a quarterly basis. This equates to about 3,000 cars a month that we're taking off the road. So the impacts of food waste are very great. And I would want everyone to take away from here what we could do to reduce food waste in our daily lives. The grocery stores that we shop at, the businesses that we attend, I would say, you know, while they went down, you used to see it at weddings and events and all these big conferences where there would be all these buffets. We've got to start asking questions of these people that we support. What are they doing with their surplus food? And if we find that they're throwing it away, I want people to begin to talk about Gooder and to talk about other things that they could be doing with their food waste. I know we were going to have a lot of questions, but I want to just give a bit of oversight there that I do believe if we can reduce food waste by just 15%, we would save enough food to feed 25 million hungry Americans, and that is just a huge place to get started. to give you guys the final picture, we waste enough food in this country every single day than the entire continent of Africa consumes in the same day. And so that's something to show you guys just a perspective. This is, if you think it's football season, even though my assistant always jokes, Agnes Scott has never lost a football game, right? So she always tells me that. But if you think about the Nebraska stadiums or the Texas stadiums that have 100,000 seats, we could fill up enough food that's just perfectly good in one of those stadiums every single day, from the top to the bottom. And those are meals that are being missed out. So that is the biggest consequence of food waste, is that people go hungry, children cannot learn, families cannot function, and this is a problem that can solve another great problem. And that's what I hope to bring to this conversation today. So thank you.
Jasmine, thank you so much. You know, I think your story shows there's so much we can do right now to tackle this problem, but I'm curious if you have thoughts on, is there state or local or federal policy that could also help us make systemic change in this area?
Absolutely, Blair, and I will say that's the other thing that I was talking about, is how the climate has changed to where this is more palatable. People are willing to have these conversations. I'm happy to say that states California, New Jersey, and New York all have legislation that begins January 1, 2022, that actually fines businesses for not diverting up to 75% of all of their food waste. And so I think that's promising. This is what's happening in Italy. This is what's happening in France. Businesses could be fined up to 10,000 euro per occurrence that they're wasting food and not donating it to NGOs in Europe. So I think something like that has to happen, because right now it's like it's on the onus of the business to want to do better. It's on their onus. And what I also believe is, we see a lot of companies, Google and Amazon and Microsoft. Oh, Amazon was saying they're investing $10 billion into climate, right? Who questions them on that? Who ensures that that actually happens? Who measures what they're doing? So that's where the policy could come into place to say, hey, how are you guys diverting, food waste? I see it on Amazon's sustainability page, and I tell you, we reach out to them all the time. At the same time, we've seen pictures on BuzzFeed of landfills filled with food that has Amazon Fresh and Amazon Go labels on it. So in one case, what we see the most of is the advertising that they pay and they put out, and we're going to be carbon neutral, or we're doing all this. We're going to have all of our fleets going to be electric, which is great. But if you're wasting your food waste, you're wasting food. It's counterproductive. So I think policy and legislation will really help the work that we do.
That's great. Thank you so much. And be thinking of your questions for Jasmine, because we're going to circle back for audience questions after this. I'm going to transition now to Michelle, who's joining us virtually. So Michelle, you now have the mic.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's lovely to be here with you guys virtually today. I'm actually going to mute my computer here so I can't hear myself talking on the feedback. But so wonderful to be here with you guys, and grateful to share some of the solutions that Groundswell is bringing to Georgia. And Groundswell, as Blair shared, our mission is building community power. And we mean that in every sense of the word. We mean it in the sense of, bringing clean energy, including community solar, resilience, and energy efficiency programs to communities that relieve energy burdens, and that are really prioritized in ways that those programs can be reparative and restorative in the investments that they're making. And, we also specifically seek to support models that, help people to own their own power too, so that ultimately we're advancing energy democracies, in all of the places that we serve. But I wanted to share 3 specific examples today, because with clean energy policy, as you guys have probably heard from many other speakers too, what is possible is very much shaped by policy. And that policy is primarily state level policy that determines, for instance, can you build a community solar project that you own? Do you have the potential of creating more rooftop solar in your neighborhoods? That's all about state policy, not about federal policy. Federal policy just kind of helps pay for it and set some clear directions. And in Georgia, of course, Georgia is a regulated utility market, which means that only the utilities are able to sell electricity in front of the meter. And that creates some constraints that we have to work in. But even within the context of those constraints, there's powerful good that can be done on the basis of analyzing the data. And as we see the evolution of federal policy, we'll also have some more money that's being invested in really modernizing our infrastructure and in supporting the health of our climate in the future that we can put to good work at the local level too. So 3 ideas to share, and three things that are underway literally as we speak here today. One, I'll start with energy efficiency, because energy efficiency is something that anyone can do anywhere. And it's something that's particularly critical in Georgia. Groundswell actually has some new research that's going to be coming out here next week. My colleague, Dr. Elvis Maleka, is going to be debuting it. And when you look at it at a state level, Georgia is one of the most energy burdened states in the entire country. And that energy burden doesn't just fall on our urban communities. That energy burden falls disproportionately on our rural communities that are served by rural electric co-ops and by municipal electric utilities. And the amount of money, that people are paying for their electricity bill just to keep the lights on as a percentage of their total household income can be extraordinary. 10%, 12%, 19%, 28%, are some of the county level statistics that we see. And, in that regard, energy policy, and particularly energy efficiency, when we're talking about as it relates to our neighbors, with lower incomes, isn't just climate and energy policy, it's really anti-poverty economic policy too. It's making life more affordable, and it's healing people's housing. Because one of the issues at the root of energy burdens, it's older, inefficient housing, and many times the fact of the housing quality issues that lead to those kinds of huge electric bills, the roots are in systemic racist practices like redlining that mean that today people are suffering with huge energy bills, discomfort, and sometimes chronic health issues associated with that, rooted in racist practices that live on today in forms that people may not even fully recognize the roots of, but that's the source. So we can do better. In LaGrange, Georgia, LaGrange is my hometown, and once upon a time I actually worked for Interface too, so I got my start on this path working for Racy Anderson. But we're leading what is called the LaGrange SOL program. SOL stands for Save on Utilities Long Term. And the city and the community came together to specifically prioritize, this program to invest in energy efficiency and ultimately healthier, more comfortable housing, for lowest income residents with the highest utility bills. And so today, we have implemented improvements and also almost 20 homes. The average amount of investment in energy efficiency for each home is more than $5,000. And the average savings is more than $500 per home per year. And SOL is paid for with savings, so it's fiscally sustainable. And it can work in big towns, it can work in small towns, it can work in rural communities. And it's something very concrete that we can do that has beneficial impacts for energy, because clean energy, includes the energy that you don't use, like through energy efficiency, supports local jobs, and it helps to heal our neighborhoods too. More things that you can do is investing in resilience. Resilience is solar, it is energy storage, and it's connecting those technologies through microgrids too. And there are incredible opportunities around the state to increase the energy resilience of our neighborhoods, supported through the National Renewable Energy Lab. Groundswell has been leading a project in service to the AUC, to Spelman College, Morehouse College of Medicine, Morehouse College, and Clark Atlanta University, working in concert with Partnership for Southern Equity. And by the middle of next week, we will be publishing the final report on that project, and we cannot wait to work together with the team to get it built. And, resilience, you think, okay, well, how often do the lights really go off? Well, among developed nations, the United States actually has more power outages than any other country that would be considered our peer from that perspective. And the impacts of climate change means that that's happening more and more. And like with all things, communities who have been impacted by pollution, environmental justice communities, low-income communities, they're also the first and worst to be impacted by climate change. And oftentimes because of practices like redlining, there was just a report that came out on this actually, those neighborhoods haven't had investments in their energy infrastructure either, and may be more prone to suffering from power outages. So by investing in solar paired, with energy storage connected through a microgrid, we can help make sure that we're keeping the lights on, particularly for our most vulnerable neighbors. So think about elderly community members, for instance. Older folks are more vulnerable to heat and to cold. Hot weather, humid weather, can actually aggravate conditions like congestive heart failure if you don't have proper conditioning. If you have diabetes, you've got to be able to keep your insulin in the refrigerator. So resilience, energy resilience isn't just about being able to stay a little bit more comfortable, or keep your cell phones charged. It's really about health and life and quality of life too. And, we can also use solar in Georgia to really pour into economic opportunity for our communities too. There's a deep connection to community economic development, particularly when solar projects are actually aligned with the priorities of the communities where they're located and the communities that they're going to serve. There are multi-thousand acre solar farms in South Georgia. Not only are there jobs that went along with those, there's solar leases for the land. There are programs in North Carolina that we're connected to that are being led. There's a wonderful company called Interwealth Solutions, whose founder is also the founder of Black-Owned Solar Services, a new nonprofit organization that's been founded, but that are connecting the location of solar projects to supporting multi-generational Black land ownership and restorative investments in Black family farms as well. So when we think about clean energy, not just from the perspective of climate, which is critically important, but when we think about all of the economic value streams that are associated with those projects too, who's building them, who's owning them, where are the savings going, who's getting the value of the land lease for where that project is located, you end up with this extraordinary abundance of opportunities to really repair and restore our communities and our neighborhoods as well. So I'm grateful to be able to share some of those ideas and some of the work that we're already doing in Georgia, the work that's feasible in Georgia, even given Georgia's regulatory and policy environment for solar. And I look forward to the Q&A and hopefully inspiring some more great community-based project ideas among the folks here today too.
Thank you, Michelle. That was really helpful. I wonder if you could share a little bit more about how you are approaching the communities that you work with. I know you guys have lots of community outreach in LaGrange, for example, and perhaps you can share how you work instead of for communities, but with them.
Absolutely. So Groundswell, and everything that we do, we are guided by our core values, and you can find our core values on our website. But among them include equity. They include respect, for the communities that we serve, and also joyful service. And joyful service is a really critical one among those values, because I think in so many instances, our society, our culture, can kind of look down on service, right? Like you want to be served, you don't want to be serving others. But from Groundswell's perspective, we see service as a privilege. It's a joyful thing to be able to go in and do with people in service to their priorities and needs. So everywhere that we work, everywhere across Georgia, everywhere that we work across the country, we always engage directly with the local community, to understand what the community and what the neighborhood's priorities are. Is it about jobs? Is it about ownership? Is it primarily about the environment? Is it about saving money? Is it about the benefits that investing in energy efficiency has for improving the quality of the housing in the community too. And then we work to align our programs to those priorities. So it's not groundswell coming in with some idea about, well, we're going to do this for you and this is the way that we do it. We're listening first, and we're building relationships, and we're staying in relationships with communities for the long term too. So we're not just like peace out as soon as the last solar panel is attached to the roof. We're committed for the long term, and that's true everywhere we serve.
Thank you so much. I'm going to turn it over to our last speaker on the panel, Whitney Brown, to talk about her work at GIPL.
Thanks, Blair. I'm really excited to be back. As Blair said, I'm an alum. I graduated in 2007, and I also worked here for 7 years, so I'm staring at my old office, which is fun. But now I work at Georgia Interfaith Power and Light as the communications director. And GIPL, which is what we call it, is a faith-based nonprofit. We are a state affiliate of a national organization, and so we've been active in Georgia for about 17 years. We work very closely with Drawdown Georgia, and actually earlier this year started a Drawdown Georgia for Congregations workshop, and are building programming out around that. And so I'm sort of going to give a brief overview of that. A lot of what I was going to say has already been covered, so I won't be too redundant. We'll save some time for y'all to have questions, or to ask us questions, but let me just tell you a little bit of how we're engaging with Drawdown Georgia. So the first two categories of climate solutions for Drawdown Georgia are electricity and building and materials. And so what we do is we have two signature programs that we engage those solutions with. One of those is called PowerWise, and one is called SolarWise. So our PowerWise program is an energy efficiency program. We go to faith communities and offer an energy audit. So that's an assessment of the building to see how well you're using your energy. Where are you leaking out power and air, and how can you become more efficient? And once a community completes that process, we give them a report, we give them some recommendations for what they could do to improve, which ranges from things like switching to LED lighting, to repairing the roof, to putting in new insulation. And it's really, so I don't actually do the audits, but I've gotten to go along on a couple of them, and you get to like climb on the roof of churches and see all of the things that people have forgotten are in their buildings, and that's fun. That's one of the things I love about my job. So we also offer matching grant funding to offset that so that folks can take on these giant projects. And then one of our other signature programs is called SolarWise. So that's our solar program. We offer solar assessments for faith communities to help them see if solar is even feasible for them. And then we also work with SolarWise, which is a crowdsource funding type solar program. We completed SolarWise Decatur DeKalb earlier this year, and basically how that works is the more people that buy solar, the cheaper the solar is. So it's really been a great way for individuals and faith communities to get solar on their buildings in a more affordable way. We also, so next solution. We also work very closely with waste diversion. We're starting a new program. All of our programs are something wise. So right now we're working on a new program called WasteWise to help congregations start composting and recycling, and sort of looking at, well, where does your recycling go? What happens after it's put in your recycling bin at your church or at your synagogue? Is it getting recycled? And so we're trying to do some education around that and help folks understand how composting and just choosing to use more sustainable materials. So even picking a plastic cup over a styrofoam cup and being able to recycle that plastic cup makes a huge difference. So really trying to make things tangible for folks. So we do engage with all 20 of these of the climate solutions, but we don't have enough time to talk about all of those. So I'm going to talk about a couple other things that GIPL works with. We're very involved in the advocacy space at the state, local, and federal level. We are super grateful to have legislators right now at the state level state and federal level, who are engaged in climate justice and putting the environment first. So we've been working closely with them and trying to assist in educating and getting information out there for our legislators, for our faith communities. And so I'll give you an example of one of the things that we're working on, coal ash, which coal ash is the toxic waste, toxic runoff from coal-powered plants. It's typically stored in these unlined ponds in the ground, and so toxins from that can leach into the groundwater, which leads to all sorts of health problems for folks. It makes your water unsafe to drink and unsafe to use in general. And so we have been advocating. I've been at GIPL for 4 years. We've been working on this problem in Georgia for at least the last 4 years. But it takes time, and it takes many voices coming together, and so being able to get faith communities to rally around a cause has been really important with us getting these sorts of things moved forward. We are also working with a couple of you, I think, got face masks when I walked in. We're working with the Climate Action Campaign, which is a federal legislation collaborative, which helps us and a couple of other Georgia nonprofits like the Sierra Club work together on some federal policy changes that we're hoping to push through. We are really counting on the new budget for our federal government to include a lot around infrastructure and around solar and other climate solutions. And so through CAC, we've been able to advance that work. And then the last thing I want to say is just how important it is to remember that the environmental space is intersectional. So we do this work because justice is important. And environmental justice is sort of the lens through which we do everything that we offer at GIPL. Environmental justice is the belief that everyone, regardless of race, class, gender, sexuality, deserves equitable access to things within the environment, to things like power, to heating and air, to food. And so that is our motivation. All of the world's religions really make statements around caring for neighbor and caring for others. And so we believe that one of the ways to care for your neighbor and to care for others is to care for the planet. So this work really matters because people matter. And so that's what motivates us to go in and keep fighting the fight every day.
All right, I'm going to ask one follow-up question and then turn it over to the audience for Q&A. But I appreciated how you laid out some of your programmatic work as well as some of your work around advocacy. I'm curious how you think about like the best pathways to motivating and sustaining and activating a grassroots movement.
Sure. So grassroots advocacy can be exhausting, as I know many of you know. And sometimes it's really hard to pick a place to start. So what we tell congregations is to start small. Pick a cause that you really care about. If you are invested in food justice, then focus on that instead of thinking, we're just going to fix environmental justice completely. There are too many different facets of that for that to be sustainable long term. So we tell folks to start small. And we tell folks to do things that feel tangible. So if it doesn't feel realistic, if it's not your comfort zone to go to the state capitol and lobby, you could write a letter to the editor. You could get an op-ed published about this important issue and just get that in people's faces more. So really making it as accessible as possible and educating folks that there's not one way to do advocacy and there's not one way to do justice work. So that's how I think that's the best way to get started.
That's great. Thank you. Well, thank you to all of our speakers. That was really wonderful. And now we're going to turn it over to you all to ask some questions.
Yes. Okay, take it off. Are we good? Okay. Awesome. Hi. So I'm here and I'm moderating the Q&A section of this panel, but I have a question myself. So first of all, I wanted to comment and thank you all for such a great panel. Jasmine Crow, my question is for you, or my comment and question. So I'm a recent and new fan of Gooder, and I recently saw in the media that you just did some really cool work with the rapper Gunna and getting with Gooder and getting the first in-store school or in-school grocery store at Ronald E. McNair Middle School. And as an Atlanta native from Clayton County, I think that's awesome. So my question to you is, how did that project even come about? Is Gooder interested in doing that in more schools? And just what was the creative process that went into getting the in-school grocery store?
Yeah, thank you. We're so excited about that. You know, we have been hosting pop-up grocery stores since 2017, and it's been a dream of mine to have something that was brick and mortar. And we get a lot of people that reach out to us that want to do a lot of one-time things, and I'm really a big pusher, if you will, for things that are sustainable and long-lasting. And so we received a call, and he was like, "Can we do something for back to school?" And I said, "Sure, but let's not do a backpack drive, you know, because there are so many of them." And he gave me all the schools that he attended, elementary, middle school, and high school. Excuse me. And I decided, let's go right in the middle. It just made my life a lot easier. Contacted the principal and actually learned that the school was formerly a failing school. And they had just gotten up to a C in 2019, but now he believed that they would be at a D, just because the pandemic put all the kids learning back. And so we just started asking, like, what were some of the needs? And of course, food was a big one. And we learned that a lot of the children really are only children in school. And that when they get home, they are taking care of their little brothers and sisters. Their parents are working 2 and 3 jobs. And so we decided, what if we brought the ability for a kid to say, "Mom, I'll pick up dinner," to the school. And so what we did to create an even level playing field, we gave all 900 children reusable grocery bags, and we filled them with items, merch items from the artist Gunna. And so it was an excitement thing. The kids were so happy. And now if a child or their parent asks that they go in and get groceries for the home, if that child has a reusable grocery bag, no one knows, like, oh, they needed food, because everyone received the bag. And so it removed that stigma and the shame. We're really excited about it. You know, we had our first shopper on Monday, a mother of 5, and just really was in tears that her twin boys could now just bring home meals for the family. And we were really cautious, as you saw, probably putting vegan sections in there, making sure that we had something for everybody, and absolutely would love to do more of them. And we've received quite a few requests to do more. And I just think that any school that is in a high poverty area, like College Park, where there's a statement saying 67% of these kids are living in poverty, bringing resources to them, again, it eliminates the thing that I said, you know, hunger is not an issue of scarcity. It's a matter of logistics. So that whole, like, how am I going to get to the grocery store? How am I going to, you know, get food for the home? Now that's removed for 900 children and their families. And so it's really exciting just to see that. And it really, I think, almost helps the environment too, right? Because the kids are already going to school on the bus. So one less trip they got to take out. Now they just bring home food right to the house. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, that's an amazing project. Thanks for talking about that. Is there another question?
Thanks. Thanks for that Ronald E. McNair initiative. That was my middle school. I have a question for Ms. Moore of Groundswell. You said you moved the power of power to communities. Do you mean like transferring maintenance of the community's power network into their hands, like in the cul-de-sac, the neighborhood, or the apartment building?
So the short answer is it depends a little bit, just because the policy environments that we work in are so very complex. But having the decision-making power, authority, and agency over the way your community gets energy, uses energy, pays for energy, are all things that we see as being really, really important because, clearly energy, electricity, power is fundamental for economy, civilization, health, well-being, in the times that we live in. And because they're so fundamental to your personal bottom line as well. I'll give you an example of a project that we're working on actually in Baltimore. And it is a resilience hub, and it will soon begin construction. The project has been underway for 4.5 years. And it is with the Empowerment Temple, which is an AME church in West Baltimore. And there, the community has been working together through the Economic Empowerment Coalition over that period of time with us to develop a solar project that was located where they wanted it to be located, that's providing power to the church, that's enabling the church to, reduce their electricity bills so that the church can invest in its community mission. They decided to also join the Baltimore Resiliency Hub program. So we're installing energy storage and a small microgrid there as well. And the church is now able to be a source of refuge for the community, for up to 2,500 people actually in West Baltimore in the case of a power outage or of some other, disruption, right? Like a very hot day or a very cold day even, where people who, may not be able to effectively heat or cool their own homes, they can come to the church. So there you've got an energy project and one that's at the leading edge of clean energy as well because of the incorporation of that battery storage too. And it is being implemented and expressed in the neighborhood in a way that the neighborhood is determining. So I think that that's really the number one measure. Is it implemented in the way that people locally want it? Is it doing what people locally want it to do? And then you can, connect all the value streams and the ownership behind the scenes.
Okay, wow. Thank you, Michelle. So we have 2 questions in the chat. They're both for Jasmine, and they're kind of around the same issue, so I'll just do both of them at a time. One is from Saswata, and she asks, how do you plan to take Gooder from Georgia to other states in the United States? She says definitely needed. And then we have Layla, who asks you, how would you start, how did you first start branching out to address, hunger in Georgia as a whole? How do you expand it within Georgia? So you have one person asking, how do you take it out of Georgia to other cities that need it? And one saying, how do you make sure you cover Georgia as a home base first, since it's locally needed? And Layla gave the example of just the children starving in Africa, but there's children starving right down the street from us. So how do we take international volunteerism and bring it here locally? Thank you.
Yeah, so one, Gooder is actually in 15 other states. I think we get that so often, but people don't know. But yeah, I think we do a lot of work in Georgia. So anyone in Georgia sees it and just thinks, oh, they're in Atlanta. So we are actually revamping our website to talk about some of our other customers that include cities of Orlando, cities of Dallas, Texas. We work with UCLA Health, the Los Angeles Lakers, the NBA, the WNBA. So we really do work all around the country and have the ability to work everywhere because the way that we operate, we've built the technology that allows the businesses to request pickups when they have surplus food. And we have a nationwide nonprofit network that's everywhere, plus a team that will source new nonprofits if for whatever reason we don't have one in the city. But how we remain asset light and really measure our own footprint is we don't own a lot of vehicles. We actually have one van that we use to service the airport because our drivers actually do drive on the tarmac. Other than that, we work with DoorDash, Uber Eats, Roadie, Omni Logistics, Uber Freight, and so we have integrated with their APIs. So if Merck Pharmaceuticals in Philadelphia requests a pickup, we have drivers in Philadelphia that will get it picked up, and then we have nonprofits already in Philadelphia as well. So I think our biggest thing is just getting more suppliers. Sadly, the need is there. There's tons of nonprofits that are within our network right now that we can't even serve just because we maybe don't have customers in their area. So we are trying to raise additional funding to grow our team, to be able to get more customers to join with us so that we can service more people and reduce more waste. And then, 100%, we always think of Georgia first, right? Because this is where we are. We've really invested in this community, and also all of our team members that have children like myself, this is where we're living. But we recognize as well that hunger and food waste exist everywhere, and we definitely have to be everywhere. Our focus first and foremost will definitely be North America. We'll be doing some more work probably later 2022 in Canada. We're currently talking to the city of Toronto on a pilot around their food waste, and who knows where we go after that. But I think Georgia will, if nothing else, be the place that birthed this company that I believe will really impact and disrupt how we've solved waste and how we've fought hunger in this country.
So while we wait for another question, I wonder, Whitney, if you could share maybe some success stories that you've seen from some of your partner synagogues or churches or mosques and different programs that they've been able to pull off.
Absolutely. We've had great success around solar lately. So we have a lot of congregations that have shifted to solar panels, whether it's on their roof or in their parking deck like Agnes got, or it's you can put solar panels on the ground. So we've seen a lot of communities of faith go solar and then be really shocked at how much they're saving. We also frequently see people who haven't seen their HVAC system, and which is heating and air. They haven't seen it in like 50 years. And so we tell them, just do this like one little upgrade, and folks will change that and save thousands of dollars a year. So usually our success stories are folks being surprised at how much money they're saving just by making small changes. But we also have seen really good success around like the city of Juliet, which is it's a town in Georgia that's been highlighted recently, or really for like the last year, looking at coal ash problems and the problems that this community is facing. And so we've really seen faith communities get excited about doing letters to the editor to rally around that cause. And I think that folks are getting more and more interested in how they can do things more active than just switching out light bulbs. Both are important, but we've had a lot of success this year, especially because of the pandemic, in getting folks to do sort of more on-the-ground stuff at an individual level.
That's great, thank you.
All right, it's me again with another question. So this question is for Michelle. And you mentioned with Groundswell that y'all, in your community outreach, you really focus on building relationships with people. And kind of just to give a context, we're in a public health pandemic and crisis, and there's a lot of mistrust in, I guess, how people look at health. And I know you mentioned that a lot of energy efficiency issues are rooted in systemic racism, with redlining being one of them, and chronic health being a symptom of redlining. So how does that work when you come into a community and you want to build a relationship, and it's a utility company? Utility companies have in the past had a history with contributing to chronic illnesses. So how do you even begin to do that?
That it is a great question, and at the root of it, right? It's about love. It's about love for our neighbors. And Whitney, I think that I think maybe you said this. It's really sort of like at the root of world religions, and even at the root of so much of the good in our lives and good in our relationships and our networks and our communities is really about love for one another, and beginning there, coming into a community with an attitude of love, and being willing to put the time in that it takes to build trust, where you have not just years, but decades and generations of broken trust and broken promises that you're working with. I'll give you two examples. In the work that we do in LaGrange, in my hometown, our community building leader is Tiara Harris. And Tiara is from the LaGrange community as well. She grew up in one of the neighborhoods that we do a lot of work in. And she has just such a deep, loving, and caring relationship for individual members of the community, and also, for LaGrange as a whole, for its progress, for its continuing reformation. And one of the ways that she expresses that love is not only through advancing the SOUL program, so that we're understanding and making sure people understand as well how these energy efficiency improvements are really going to, make not just their light bills lower, but make their homes more comfortable too. She takes the time to really understand what some of their other needs are, because you talk about what it's been like for the ongoing pandemic, for the past year and a half, but for so many people, it's aggravated their needs. They haven't been able to get to the doctor. For elderly people and for people who are living on very limited incomes, maybe they haven't been able to get the food that they need. There are all sorts of things that people have suffered through that if you just take a little bit of time to get to know them, you can understand and see and try to connect them to other resources that can be able to help meet their needs. And so through Tiara's work and through the work of my colleague, Linwood Coleman, we've built a network that, individually, not any single organization, not Groundswell, not anybody else would be able to meet everybody's needs, but collectively, you can come together as a community around people and help take a little bit better care of them. So that has included delivering fresh organic food, from a nearby organic farm. That has included, working with Three Rivers and some of the other social service organizations to pay people's rent bills when their rent has gotten behind due to COVID or due to other things in their lives. And just by making those connections and demonstrating that care and helping the systems that are already in place that are meant to support people, but maybe aren't connected all the way to the people who need them, work together better in that environment of love. And in a little more technical example, we do a lot of work in Washington, D.C. D.C. is our hometown and Groundswell's hometown. And one of the things that we do is run the D.C. Solar for All community solar program. So we serve about 5,000 low-income households with free community solar. Cuts their bills by about $2 million in aggregate per year. Washington, like many places, has been, very, very shut down, obviously due to the public health crisis. And it hasn't been possible to engage in person as we normally would. But we've taken the time over the past year to really understand who our customers are, who are we serving? How do they prefer to communicate? More than 70% of the people that we're working with are over 55. Only 25% of them have and use email. Most of them, more than 78%, are women. More than 80% are Black or African American. And so rather than depending on emails that, probably aren't going to land, 75% of the time, they're not going to get to the person that they're intended to, or phone calls where, people aren't necessarily comfortable picking up the phone if they don't recognize the telephone number. We've backed up and depended on snail mail. And, 4 times a year last year, twice a year this year, we'd send people mail in the U.S. mail. And, just making sure that those pieces of mail are joyful representations of the work that we're doing, joyful representations of the community, include art and culture and ideas that connect this very technical subject of community solar subscriptions, to a bigger idea, has helped to build much more of a sense of community among our customers. And as a practical matter, it helps us get people's telephone numbers so that we can communicate with them more easily. But it gives us an opportunity to answer their questions. And, like I said, the thing that both of them have in common is really doing the work from the perspective of really loving the community and love and care for the people that we're serving, and listening and making sure that we're meeting needs in the way that they tell us we need to be meeting needs for them.
Thank you. Are there other audience questions? I'll take a moderator privilege while people think them over. So Michelle really talked about this kind of high touch community communication. Jasmine, I know one of the ways that you have done an amazing job sharing the Gooder story is actually through social media and your Twitter feed. And I'm curious how you think about how to effectively communicate about an issue that really intersects with so many things that people care about or could care about, and what you found to be maybe successful in some of the challenges.
Yeah, I think some of the challenges is there's so much to know. Like, you know, even if you look at Project Drawdown, you guys have identified 20 things. So a lot of times it's like, how do we dissect that? What I always really try and do is just own our narrative around feeding more and wasting less, and just sticking to that story. You know, we also get a lot of questions. You know, people say things like, oh, the issue in America isn't hunger, it's obesity. And we're like, well, there's still people that are going hungry, you know? So a lot of times I feel like I have to pick and choose what to respond to, and just understanding that some things could definitely be a teaching moment. You know, yesterday I tweeted, because I didn't know this, I don't know if anyone else knew this, I didn't know that marshmallows contain gelatin. And so I was like, wait, so one of my team members is vegan, and she was like, oh, you know that has pork? And I was like, no, I didn't know that. So just posting that, it created a flood of comments that so many other people are like, are you kidding me? I never knew that. No more Rice Krispie treats for me. I don't eat pork. I'm vegetarian. How could this be? And, you know, like, I felt bad, but I educated a lot of people around something that I just found out. So a lot of times it's just telling the story. And then, you know, I guess the audience has really built organically for me, because I literally probably had like 1,500 Twitter followers in 2018, you know, so to be at almost 40,000 now is crazy, because it's really just been about showcasing and just telling the story, and what we are all doing is good. And I always believe like the good story should always be told, because our news is filled with negative stories, right? So just talking about the positive things that we're doing, and then just asking your network to share them is a great thing.
That's great. And we have a question from the audience. I'll take that one.
Hello. So my question is for everyone. How do your organizations that do community work determine who in a community to work with, and how to unite those individuals? As an example, I'm from Georgia. I'm from Augusta, Georgia. It is a predominantly Black county surrounded by other predominantly Black counties. And we don't really have a united sense of community leaders. So oftentimes when organizations and mostly businesses say, we're gonna work with the communities, they go with the faces of the communities, which end up being white and wealthy people who are a minority in our group, and we don't really get the help that we need. So how do your communities determine, how do your organizations determine who to work with in a community?
So maybe Whitney, do you want to take that first?
Yeah, I think mine's the easiest answer, because we're faith-based. So we work with faith communities, but as you pointed out, it does often tend to be predominantly white, progressive, higher wealth communities of faith who engage with us. So really during the pandemic, we've made a much more concerted effort to sort of modify our own narrative, and this goes back to sort of social media as well. So how do we make our social media, how do we make our website, how do we make our program descriptions sound more representative of all of the organizations we're trying to work with, instead of just a specific audience that we've had success with? And sometimes that looks like putting up more photos of people who look like me and you. Sometimes that looks like highlighting success stories in the news that get people to engage. But I would say, yes, we work with faith communities. People are sort of self-selecting as they go along on their green journey. I think it's hard to figure out, sort of like with advocacy, it's hard to figure out where to step into that. And so the more that we can make it really accessible and easy, the more likely we are to engage with people who are a more diverse group of folks.
So maybe we'll have one other person answer that. Michelle, do you want to talk about how you guys kind of come to the communities that you work for?
Sure. And I'll share just briefly from two perspectives. Groundswell as an organization is very diverse. Our board, our leadership team, my entire staff. And as an organization, our values-oriented goal is to create a culture of belonging, where all of us can really show up as our authentic selves. And the diversity of Groundswell's organization from every perspective, has also connected us to an extraordinarily diverse set of communities and community organizations. Many of the local leaders that we work with are faith-based. They're pastors from a congregation, the head of the outreach ministry for a local congregation, the head of a monastic order in Washington, D.C., or it may be neighborhood level leaders who reach out to us or connect to us through people who are members of our team or directly, or who are members of our board. That it's been a very organic set of outreach activities there that have brought forward a very diverse set of community-based relationships with Groundswell. At the outreach level, though, we have two values and goals in our strategic plan that guide us, and we use a lot of data. Groundswell specifically priorities working in service to communities that are low income and or have been impacted by systemic racism. And so that's how Groundswell chooses, where we work. And then in understanding who in those communities we seek to serve, again, we're focused on relieving energy burdens. We're focused on really justice and equity as it relates to our clean energy systems. So we go in and look at the data. Who is energy burdened? What is that energy burden? Are there racial disparities in who is energy burdened? Where are the neighborhoods? What are the histories of those neighborhoods? Are there histories of redlining? Are there histories of segregated housing? Are there other aspects of how those communities came to be that impacted the situation that we have today? And then we specifically target our activities in ways that meet the very specific need. And when we're doing direct outreach to sign people up for free solar subscriptions for our empowered subscribers, or to sign people up for Soul, we're specifically reaching out to the people who are the most energy burdened and who have the greatest need. And that's who we put first.
Thank you. Okay.
You took the moderator's prerogative. I'm going to take the wrap-up person's prerogative and ask Blair to answer a question. So you mentioned, of course, in the beginning and the title of the session about Drawdown moving from analysis into action, and then had your wonderful set of speakers to talk about that. But do you want to comment about a bit on that and from the Drawdown perspective in terms of those next steps?
Sure. So as I mentioned briefly in that overview, Drawdown was really inspired by looking at this set of global solutions that Project Drawdown had laid out. And for us saying, this is really helpful, and what should we be doing here in Georgia? Which of these 100 solutions that Project Drawdown identified really make the most sense? How can we in Georgia do the most this decade to start reducing our greenhouse gas emissions? And so instead of just starting, and running fast at that goal, we instead decided to pause and do some research and say, what if we actually brought together leading academics to start crunching the numbers and looking at what is really technology and market ready here in our state that would really have the biggest bang for our buck? And so in October of last year, we came out with that set of 20 solutions. And since then, we have really worked to form a leaderful movement. So there is not one leader of Drawdown Georgia. Instead, it's really a framework for action to help people in this space who are already moving in this direction hopefully go further faster, and to bring new voices and new stories to the table to help us all push forward on this low carbon journey. And so, there are lots of things that we're really excited about from the foundation's perspective at this 1-year mark. There are things like this Drawdown Georgia Leadership Council, which Jasmine is so kindly helping to co-chair, which is just helping to bring a lot of perspectives to the table as we really go on this journey together. We are hoping to announce soon a group of businesses that are coming together who are either headquarters or have a large footprint here in Georgia, who are going to be making carbon reduction commitments and vision statements as a group. And so I think that's going to be kind of launched publicly next month. We have the Drawdown Georgia for Congregations, which Whitney has been talking about, thinking about how we can bring these solutions to faith-based communities who are already trying to work within their communities to implement climate solutions, and now just have an additional framework to help make those tough choices. We know we can't do it all. Here's a roadmap of 20 things we think would be really helpful right now. And then we have our higher ed, our Drawdown Georgia for Higher Ed, which I know Agnes Scott has been involved in, which is bringing together our universities in the state to think about the role, the critical role that they play when it comes to teaching the next generation of climate leaders their own carbon footprints on their university campuses, and the research that professors and students are doing to help us understand even more about both the challenges we face and the solution sets that we have in front of us.
Thank you. Yes, please.
The business council that Drawdown has put together includes a lot of amazing businesses. So I think once those are announced, I think they really will lead the way in Georgia with more people getting involved. I personally was really excited to see all the companies that have pledged.
No, thank you for underscoring that. And we have a panel tomorrow on business innovation and socially responsible investment. And I think to the fact that you've talked today about a business approach that, partly would sound to a lot of people like it's more of a nonprofit advocacy approach, but you are such an example, Goodar is such an example of a small business, well, not so small now, that does good, right? So thank you for being that representative today, that sort of bridge between the advocacy side and the nonprofit side in business. Thank you, Whitney, for George. I have watched or been involved with GIPL for a long time, and it's really, GIPL has moved into that much more deep and wide community work, and I think that's really reflected in the connection to Drawdown. Thanks to Michelle for being long distance, that busy city of Washington, D.C. And for staying true to your state, your home state of Georgia, and doing creative things here in other parts of the country. And thank you, Blair. Blair was a super partner to work with to organize this and to brainstorm about people and to get everybody briefed and all. So I'm really grateful for all the extra effort, Blair, that you went to. And that summary of Drawdown, I think, is a really good way to kind of end our day, because it layers these important principles about dealing with climate change, addressing climate change and sustainability in general, of basing your work on research, but not getting stuck in the research, but taking that forward and finding partners to find solutions. So one of the big themes of this conference, taking action and finding solutions. So thanks to Drawdown and Anderson Foundation for setting that path forward. So I think we're literally, if that clock is right, 36 seconds away from the end of day one. So thanks again to everybody joining us virtually today, a big crowd with us online. Thanks for our folks in the audience for all the good questions, both from students and staff, as well as our questions online. We are just halfway through our conference, so tomorrow morning we'll start again at 9 a.m. with a panel with Catherine Wilkinson, who's been referred to several times today, the co-author of All We Can Save, but with three young voices from different parts of the U.S. and some abroad right now, in fact, but that will really fill in, I think, those action steps that young voices can take. The business innovation panel that I already mentioned with BlackRock and Microsoft, and others representing business, and then Cecilia Martinez, who is at the White House Council on Environmental Quality, CEQ, and then a panel on health and environmental justice in the afternoon. And I think Professors Whitworth and Dutton mentioned our solutions sessions in the afternoon as well. So we've got a big day tomorrow. We hope you'll participate as fully as you can, as us both in person and online. And join me in thanking this amazing panel for wrapping up the day. So thank you all. See you tomorrow.